Prattville, Alabama. He had called and said that he didn't really qualify to have work done here, but he had an engine for his 2003 Prius that he wanted to put in there, or he wanted somebody to put in there, and nobody would work on it because it was a hybrid. And the one shop that said they do it wanted to charge him $2,500 to put it in there. And I was talking to the guy a little bit, and he worked for the power company, and he was in his 60s, and he was ranch smart. He said he had put a water pump on the car years ago, and I says, why don't you put the engine in there? Just watch what you're doing, take it out, and put it back in there. And about the next couple of days, he called and said, I put one in there. It didn't even take me 10 hours. He goes, easiest job I ever did. And he said, nothing runs like a sewing machine. So it wasn't really that difficult to do. But basically, most of what we're doing here, you need to know how they work, and you need to know what to do to not get, lit up working on one and all that. So let's jump into this Special Topix 2 Test 3. And this is some more alternative fuel stuff. Part of it here is what color is diesel fuel dyed if it's for off-road use only? It's red. I've actually, whenever I would be working on power stroke diesel engines, if I took the top off of the fuel filter, which the top screws off and you can see the fuel when you do that on the power stroke diesels that I worked on in those days, if I saw red diesel fuel in there, I'd put the lid back on it and I'd tell them to go burn that out and run 2 tanks of regular fuel through there before I work on it at all. Because it's actually got a different formulation. It can gel and clog up the injectors and all kinds of stuff. And if they were having trouble, then that usually would be something I needed taken care of first, What clogs fuel filters when the temperature is low on a vehicle that uses diesel fuel? What is it? There's something that clogs it. Put your phone away, guys.
Sulfur?
Huh? It's not sulfur, it's wax. Wax crystals. Got it? You got that now? Specific gravity of diesel fuel is measured how? What units is it measured in?
API gravity.
Hey, that was a good answer. API gravity. Give that man a gold star. Okay. Now, what rating of diesel fuel indicates how well a diesel engine will start?
I know.
That's number 4. Let's go. What you got?
Cetane.
Cetane rating. Okay, who in here can tell me what cetane is?
Doesn't it butane?
Cetane is a colorless liquid that has perfect combustion properties, and its value is 100. And they compare diesel fuel to cetane, and usually most of your diesel fuel now is in the 40 to 50 range nowadays. Of course, they also use the for a long time it was 40, but cetane is like the standard that they use, and they compare the diesel to it. So basically, when you look at the cetane rating, it's how the fuel you're using compares to cetane is what that number means. And with cetane being 100. All right. Let's see. Ultra low sulfur diesel fuel has how much sulfur content? And what does ppm stand for? Parts per million. Hello. Hello. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Let me. I was. Okay. Now then, let's move on here. We got 15 parts per million. Okay. E-diesel fuel is fuel with what additive? Ethanol, right? All right, you got that. Biodiesel is a regular diesel fuel with vegetable oil added.
Right. What's 5?
That's 15 parts per million. A. Incidentally, I was going to say whenever it comes to diesel fuel, diesel fuel and gasoline, and related to a diesel engine, it's really strange how some of these engines operate different. If you mix a bunch of gasoline with the diesel fuel and a regular power stroke diesel, the ones that I've seen will run crummy like they ain't got no power. But one time when I was working at a Volkswagen place, a lot of those little Volkswagen diesel rabbits, they had a Bosch fuel system. The injectors were actually screwed into the head with big threads, and underneath it had a sealing washer. It was a specially shaped sealing washer. It was made out of metal. And I was sitting there working on a customer's diesel engine one time, and the whole front of the engine was nasty greasy. And I was figuring, I need to clean that up a little bit. I don't need to go out here looking like that. And ordinarily, you'd spray some non-flammable brake clean down there, Not all brake cleaner is non-flammable, by the way. I think that's what stuff we're using is flammable. It all smells like it'll explode, but if you get the CRC brake clean, it's not flammable. But just because something's brake clean, don't assume it's not flammable, because some of it's flammable and all that. All right, so what I'm getting at is, I had a little coffee can with it was about half full of gasoline sitting over here on my bench. I don't know what it was doing sitting there, but the engine's sitting here idling. And I said, I'm just going to pour this gasoline down the front of the engine because, I wasn't pouring it in the intake. I was basically just pouring it down the front of the engine. It was kind of washing around the injectors. But in my mind, they're screwed into the head and they got a sealant washer under them. There's no danger of anything. I'm just washing metal, even though the thing. But when I did that, somehow that gasoline wound up going in there and the engine tried to run away. Scared me to death. Didn't last very long, but I was like, wow. And the customer's standing there watching, But I said, I'll not do that again. I never would have believed it would have done it. If somebody told me, would it be okay to do this? I didn't think it'd be causing a problem. But the long and short of it is, not all diesel engines act the same way when they get gas, and just, you got to make sure whenever you're looking at something like that nobody's put gas where diesel's supposed to be or diesel where gas is supposed to be. That's the long and short of it. Okay. 5 is 15 ppms, and that's A. And 6 is e-diesel is diesel fuel with ethanol, right? 7, biodiesel is regular diesel fuel with vegetable oil added. Is that true or is that false?
False.
That's false. A B20 diesel has how much regular diesel fuel? B20. 80%. 80% of it is actually regular diesel. Okay, number 9. Most diesel fuel is what grade? What grade is it? It's going to be grade 2. Most of it's grade 2.
Hey, what is B20 biodiesel fuel? Like, that tank looks like that different stuff in it, or what is it?
Oh, it's basically got that part. It's vegetable oil, or something else, or or ethanol, or whatever they're putting in there. I know that whenever we were doing this Power Stroke stuff, they said you didn't need any more than 5%. It need to be 95% diesel fuel, no more than 5% in order for them Power Strokes to work right. But that's a pretty good thing. I don't know nowadays what they're doing with that. This is sort of one of them things. Why don't some of you guys tell me what the difference between biodiesel fuel, and regular diesel fuel is? Now, I know some people used to go and they would get the oil that they use from cooking French fries.
Yeah. I know a guy that did that over in Fort River. He uses trucks every time he drives. It smells like French fries.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can, and they can.
Yeah, to strain it and do all sorts of stuff. So
yeah. One of the automakers, I forget which one it was. I read an article about it. Had a vehicle that would literally run off of 5 different kinds of fuel, and basically had several different gas tanks. But if you could put any of several different kinds of fuel in it and just run it off almost anything and all that. And then you got the one people that talking about how they can run them off water. Anyway, most diesel fuel is grade 2. Most manufacturers of vehicles equipped with diesel engines allow what type of diesel? What type? Equipment. Well, they allow. What type of biodiesel? That's what I should have said. That's going to be C. B5. That's what I was talking about before. The electronic diesels are like that particularly. Most all the diesels nowadays are electronic diesels. You don't hardly ever see any of the old-fashioned diesels anymore. Everybody's making electronic. They're also using EGR on diesels to keep oxides of nitrogen down and that kind of thing. Not only are they recirculating the exhaust gas, they're also cooling it on the way back in there. And if you, like I told you the other day, if you flow EGR on a gas-burning engine, it rattles rough. If you flow EGR on a diesel engine, it makes it run quieter, which is pretty interesting, how that works. Like if you could command that, with your scan tool, you'll hear the engine quieting down where you can even hardly hear it running. It doesn't rattle like it did. Diesel fuel should have a rating of what? Cetane, did I say? 11 is going to be C. That's 45 to 50. The higher the cetane rating, what? A, the easier engine starts cold. B, the easier it starts when hot. C, more power engine produces. D, both B and C. Okay, that's basically A. Easier it starts when it's cold. Have you guys seen anybody trying to start a diesel engine and there's all kinds of white smoke coming out the back and it won't start?
I've never tried starting a diesel engine.
You'll see somebody every now and then, if you fool around with diesels a lot, you'll see them spinning there. There's all kind of white smoke coming out the back and it won't start and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's basically your fuel coming out the back. And we had a one of those Power Stroke diesels in there. They're supposed to hold 55 pounds of fuel pressure, but they use oil, high pressure engine oil pressure to operate the fuel injectors. And so basically that's an adaptive learning deal. You don't have a throttle cable or anything. The computer does it all. And I pulled one in there. They said it was starting kind of hard. And so I took the fuel pressure on it, and it was like 20 pounds. It was supposed to be 55 to 80. And I said, this thing's got low fuel pressure on it. Of course, there's a little valve, little relief valve in the filter head that can have a bent or broke spring that cause that. I didn't find that on that one. I said, it's going to have a pump. Well, it has a pump that's like a high and low pressure pump made together right in the valley down there. It's riding on top of the camshaft. And so the shop foreman says, well, I'm going to take this over there and let, since you're all swamped with drivability work, we'll let the Eddie put the fuel pump on it. I said, that's fine. Of course, Eddie really liked that because it's pays like 6 hours to do that, and if you do it right, it doesn't take all that long to do it. But anyway, he put that fuel pump on there. And so the shop foreman came over there and says, since Eddie put that fuel pump on there, this truck won't start. It just spins and spins and spins. And I heard him over, no. They're going to burn that starter up on that thing. And then see white smoke rolling out the back and all that kind of stuff. Well, see, it would start when it had 20 pounds of fuel pressure. They got the fuel pressure up where it was supposed to be. It wouldn't start. And I had an idea that I knew what was wrong with it, but I wasn't going to say anything because it get mixed up with what they were doing, So anyway, he came over and said, what do you suppose that thing won't start for? And I says, it's probably flooded. Jeremy, put that down and bump Zach and wake him up. Okay, so basically he says, I says it's flooded. And he says, you can't flood a diesel. You know what I mean? Spark plugs engines flood because the plugs get wet and the fire doesn't jump across the gap. It runs around on the wet. And if it's running on the wet, it ain't sparking. If it ain't sparking, you ain't firing nothing, right? That's why you hold the gas pedal all the way before it dries the plugs out and it fires up. And so he says, you can't flood no diesel. This guy's a lot older than me. I think he was 18 years old when I was born. And I said, well, I reckon that you're probably on your own then. I mean, I don't know. It ain't flooded. So he went back over. About an hour later, he came back and he goes, come over here and see if you can figure out what's wrong with this thing because it's killing us, And so I went over and I got in and I looked at the scan tool and I looked at the control pressure, which is supposed to be about 500 to 1,000 pounds when you're starting it, and I saw it go up to 3,800 pounds. And I said, that thing learned to start with low fuel pressure by jacking the control oil pressure up on the injector. So we're going to pull the battery cables off. And I said, we pull the battery cables off. I said, pull the battery cables off. We're going to let it forget everything it knows. Just clear the memory. Just start over. And he goes, now tell me again how you can flood a diesel. I said, well, Philip, you know that a diesel fires on compression, right? You can put enough fuel in there to where it soaks up all that heat where it can't fire. And it's just going to keep going out. And he kept saying, no. He just couldn't wrap his head around that, And so after about 5 minutes or so, I said, put the battery cables back on it now, all 4 of them, because they had 2 batteries in there. And I said, let's see what happens, because it didn't cost anything to pull the battery cables off. I mean, you know what I'm saying? We put the battery cable back on. Oh, started up. Philip still sitting there saying, no. Well, see, the fuel control oil pressure went down to about 500 to 1,000 pounds where it was supposed to be, and it was putting the right amount of fuel instead of too much, and it fired right up. Long and short of it is, if you change something that has caused an adaptive learning shift in a particular direction, and now the car or the truck or whatever's not running right, the smartest thing you can do, that's one of the reasons that it's wise to go ahead and just take the battery cable off while you're working on it, because you make the computer forget all of that adaptive learning that it did, and then when you put the battery cable back on, you ain't got to deal with all this stuff. Because you can really get in over your head like that. When in doubt, pull the battery cables off and let it start over. You get me?
My mom used to drive that Wrangler before we put a new battery in it. It used to run like crap. We put a new battery in it, and it ran pretty weird for a while, but then it started running better.
That's because of the adaptive learning. And what a Dodge will do, gas-burning Dodge, if you pull the battery out and put it back in, or if the battery goes dead, it won't idle for a while. Crank it up, it go dead. Crank it up, it go dead. Crank it up, it go dead.
That's kind of like what it is.
Yeah.
I think the last measurement Matt had to do with that truck, the battery kept dying, went home charged.
Yeah, that's what happens. You clean the throttle body and you toll the battery, and then you let it start over, and it'll usually idle. If you just drive it around for a while, it'll learn to idle. That's adaptive learning. That's what that's all about. That came out in the mid-'80s. Well, they started doing that. A lot of people, they didn't tell us about it for a while. It was confusing. Okay, the API gravity of number 2 diesel fuel should be about what?
45.
Are you just guessing? It's 30. It's actually 35. It's 35. Okay, question number 14. Technician A says diesel fuel has more heat energy than gasoline. Technician B says grade 2 is a grade recommended for normal service in automobile diesel engines. Which automotive diesel engines, rather? Which technician is correct on that? Number 14 is going to be C. Both of 'ems. All right. Number 15. Specifications for diesel fuel include A. Sulfur content. B. Pour point. C. Cloud point. D. All of the above. That's D. What is something that, have you ever heard of algae growing in diesel fuel? You ever heard of that? It will do it. Algae will grow in there and clog everything up. It'll make a mess like you ain't seen. Well, some of them boats down there, I mean, it can do it in any diesel fuel, but some of them boats down there that I used to see in oil patch country when I worked down there, those boats that get cloud algae in their tank, and it's really hard. It's really something you wouldn't think algae would grow in petroleum. You know what I mean? But it can't. There's a kind of algae that can grow in there and just really clog things up. Ultra low sulfur diesel has a maximum of how many parts per million of sulfur? And, yeah, that's going to be a D there, 15. Yeah. Biodiesel blend that has 5% biodiesel in conventional fuel is called what? That's at B5. We had that other question that we answered a while ago was like that. Okay, now somebody's going to have to answer this one here for me because I'm not sure I know the answer. When a battery becomes completely discharged, both positive and negative plates become blank and the electrolyte becomes blank. Okay, that's PbSO4/H2O, PbO2/H2O4, PbSO4, H2SO4, or H2SO4/PB.
Go with B.
Let's go with A on that one. PbSO4 and H2O, right? Okay, now if I've got a battery that's a, deep cycling, what does that mean? What is a deep cycle? Why is it that you?
Is it C?
Huh?
Answer C, right?
You can drop real low, charge on, drop real low, and you charge it.
You can kill it and recharge it.
Yeah, that's what that means. What about if I do that on the battery in my Taurus? Or
I can do that in the battery in my car.
how many times?
Well, I mean, it's a yellow top bottom. But, I don't know how many times.
Oh yeah, he's got one of them extremely expensive batteries that nobody else would buy but him.
I got two of them in my
Yeah,
car.
he's got two of them in his car. How much they cost? $250 a piece or something?
Yeah, they were.
Iron Man, he's got to come up with the heavy duty money to buy those batteries. Huh? All right,
It
so
hurt a little bit when I bought it.
so deep cycling is C. Let me ask you this: where would you use a deep cycling battery?
In the back of my car.
No, I mean if your car didn't exist, where would you use one?
On a boat.
Yeah, the boat. You're going to use it for your trolling motor or something. You can run it all the way down, charge it all the way back up. You might notice, you know how some of our trainer cars have got bad batteries that won't even take a charge? The reason is because they've been run down and charged up so many times. One thing you learn really well to do here is jump a car off. You can jump a car off. You know what I mean? Within the first 2 weeks when you're here in my automotive department, you can jump a car off good as anybody. But you go ahead and jump something off every time you go out there. And see, he had to go over there to the parking lot. He had to go over there to the parking lot for the nursing building yesterday, and he said they had jumper cables. They didn't know how to use them. You know what I mean? Matt had to go over.
Two girls in their nurse department. I walked over there with a jumper box. I carried it all the way over there. And they said, well, we got jumper cables. We just don't know how to use them. I was like, really? You don't know how to jump a car off. The red one goes on the red, the black one goes on the black. Do the same thing on the other side.
Why don't you just use the jumper box?
Because I had to show them how to use jumper cables.
Back in the days when cars had chrome bumpers on them, that were hooked to the frame instead of having plastic. While they got over now, what you could do is you could ease those cars up against one another where those chrome bumpers were touching, and just hook one jumper cable up from hot to hot, and it would fire up. One jumper cable. But now you can't do that on cars that have plastic bumpers. But if it had chrome bumpers, on those things,
Yeah.
it was smooth as silk, man. I don't know how we could see that too. Just ease it up there where they're touching,
My town car, I hooked the cables up one time and it wouldn't crank. And then so I had to hook the power and then hook the ground to, a piece of metal or something. Then it cranked up.
Yeah, that's because you didn't have a really good ground. And that's what you're supposed to do that anyway, hook it to the engine block, because you're really going closer to where it needs to be. If you go to the engine block, you're actually going closer. Have you noticed how the ground cable goes down to the starter? usually from the battery. I mean, sometimes it'll go to the engine block, but on a lot of cars it'll go right down to the starter. I mean, because that's where it needs the current flow the most, so you're going to put them right there. But if you hook it to the engine block, you're really doing yourself more good than you are hooking it to the battery, you know. The last connection you're supposed to make is basically supposed to be at the engine block anyway, because you don't want to make a spark. You see what I'm saying? And just like him, if you see a couple, and I'm not, you know, there are some women that know how to jump a car off as good as anybody. But if you see a couple of girls out there and they're trying to hook up jumper cables and it looks like they don't know what they're doing, it's always a good idea to go give them a hand, because they'll have to blow something up. You know what I'm saying? And hook it up.
Give you their number.
Yeah, yeah. Unless they're old enough to be your mama. Okay,
Yeah.
then let me see here. We're going to get this thing. Where are we at? Number 20. Which battery rating is tested at 0 degrees Fahrenheit? Is it the battery voltage test, the cold cranking amp test, the reserve capacity, or the cranking amperes?
CCA.
That's B. That's a CCA. Which battery rating is expressed in minutes? That's reserve capacity, right? What battery rating is tested at 32 degrees Fahrenheit?
Warm cranking.
Pardon me? Warm cranking amps. That don't sound warm to me. What do you think? Somebody give me a number on that. That's D, isn't it? Cranking amps. When load testing a battery, which battery rating is used to determine how much load to apply to the battery? This is battery stuff.
CCA?
That's CCA, that's right. If I was going to, remember that one day I was over at the, we're talking about jumping off cars. I went to Winn-Dixie over there. You know, I told you that somebody made me tell that story. There's this little old lady out there, they're trying to jump her car off with what looked like some pretty nice jumper cables. And I went and got my old big heavy ones and hooked it up and it fired it right up. We was over as a tractor. They was trying to start a diesel tractor out there at this farmer's place one time. I went out there and them hooked up and they was running the car for a while. They was run like that. I said, why don't you let me get my jumper cables? And that kid that was helping him said, that ain't going to make no difference. So I hooked up my jumper cables and it fired right up. The jumper cables make more difference. You think they will. And good-looking jumper cables can be a crummy starter. You know, mine, the one that I carry in my pickup truck, I don't have them in my car, they are absolutely huge. I got some wire that they were using to run 880 current down to the helicopter port whenever I was working at Sabine Offshore. And those things are, I don't know what size wire that is, but those things are bigger than my thumb. They're huge. The copper in them has got, it's enormous. Yeah, I mean, you got to take them and put them up on. I made my dad had a jumper cable like that for his sawmill motor, and he said if I could carry these things around, it'd be okay. But boy, were they heavy. The battery high rate discharge load capacity test is being performed. Huh? Yeah, those were actually some leftover cable. I actually had to pay $20 just for the clamps going in. And a battery high rate discharge test is being performed on a 12-volt battery. Technician A says a good battery should have a voltage reading higher than 9.6 volts while under load at the end of a 15-second test. That sounds pretty draconian, doesn't it? Technician B says the battery ought to be discharge loaded twice to its CCA rating. Twice its CCA rating? I don't think so. That's going to be A. If you're putting a load test on the battery, you're going to put the load test. Like even if I'm spinning the starter over, for 15 seconds, and I'm not saying you do that every day, I don't want to see that thing go down below about 9.6 volts. What about the other end of it? What if I'm charging a battery on high charge with a good battery charger? What should the voltage not go above? Remember? 15 and a half. 15 and a half volts. If you look at that little Midtronics battery charger we got, it's a kind of a heavy duty Midtronic battery charger. That little rascal has got a gauge on there where it's got red and green. And if you put that battery on charge, you put it on high charge, and after 3 minutes, if that needle climbs, or even before 3 minutes, if that needle climbs into the red while that battery's charging, that battery is sulfated. The plates are coated with sulfur, and you need to replace the battery, okay? So if you got a voltmeter, a cheap $10 voltmeter, and you hook it to the battery while you're charging it, and you watch it, if it goes above 15 and a half volts, that battery may start the car, but it ain't going to be strong enough to do, How many of you guys have gone out there when there was a cold snap, and all of a sudden your car wouldn't start? Or you've seen that? Like all of a sudden, and I've actually seen them too, where you crank it up, everything's fine, then all of a sudden you pull up in front of somewhere, and now the battery does nothing. And you can, if you pull it's always good to have your expensive safety glasses on when you're doing this. But if you go and do the, basically you're going to watch down in the holes, make sure that if anything blows up, it won't get you. Have your face protection on. And if one of those cells just boiling to beat the band, that's a bad battery. Sometimes you'll have one that's shorted. Something else that can happen with a battery is it can short out on the inside of the battery and kill itself overnight. So you can have a parasitic drain. Most of the time you will have. But if you take the battery cable off and you leave it off overnight when it was charged up, and you come back and it's dead the next morning and it wasn't hooked up to nothing, it's a bad battery. It can kill itself. You see what I'm saying? And this is just basic battery stuff here. When charging a lead acid battery, which is the one that's swimming with, yours has got gel in it, that Optimus thing, I think. But
Yeah, that's right.
number 25, the initial charging rate should be about how much? What do you think? It should be 35 amps for 30 minutes. Battery temperature should not exceed 125 degrees. The battery may not accept a charge for several hours, yet still be a good battery. If you've got a battery that has been run dead enough, and here's another little thing a lot of people didn't know, we used to run into it in the 70s in filling stations all the time. Sometimes a battery would go completely dead, and Bessie Mae would take the battery out of her car and bring it to her, in there, set it on the table, and she would hook her trickle charger up to it backwards because it was completely dead. And she would charge that thing up, and it would be totally charged up backwards. And so you would have a backwards charge on it. And when she went to put it back in the car, when she went to hook the battery cables up, it would spark. And so they bring it to the gas station and say, I charged my battery up backwards. And so we would, most people have never heard of that, have you? If you run it dead enough and you hook a trickle charger up to it and charge it all night, you can charge it up backwards. But what we would have to do is we'd have to hook a headlight bulb up to it and just let it burn until it completely ran it all the way back down to where there's nothing in it, and then we'd hook it up and charge it up the other way.
I have a question. What if you're charging the battery with the terminal still on the battery?
That doesn't typically bother it a whole lot, but you'll do a better job if you'll get them off. That's like when you're checking it with that inductance tester we got over there, a capacitance, whatever it is, that tester we got, inductive battery tester. If you take the battery terminals off, you'll get a more true reading than you will if you do it with it on there.
Somebody told me they charged their battery on their four-wheeler and left the post on and it messed something up on their four-wheeler.
Well, I ain't going to talk about no four-wheeler. It may have messed something up on it, but it's always better to take at least one of the cables
What
off.
messed up? They said something about like all the stuff on the like the dash thingy, like it says all the stuff, it don't work anymore.
They probably blew a fuse, But I don't know. I don't know about a four-wheeler. I'm not a four-wheeler mechanic.
Oh, come on now.
Okay.
Everything. Master.
Okay, now we're getting into some hybrid stuff here. Watch this. Where 25 was D, by the way. Where are the AGM auxiliary batteries located in a hybrid electric vehicle? Usually
In the trunk rear area.
in the trunk rear area. And what does AGM stand for? Just think of them as glass mat batteries. They're not, they're a different type of battery. And how they look different from a regular battery. They're similar, but what's different about them? Have you seen one? No, actually, they're actually about the same size. Not the batteries, not the big batteries.
They don't really look anything.
That's not the glass mat. But glass mat battery is a 12-volt battery, and it's got smaller posts
Not that much.
than a regular battery. The posts are smaller than a regular battery post.
Side post.
And the best way to charge one of those back up, if you got something that's dead, is just start the car. Let the car do it. Let the car charge it back up. That's a good way to do it. And that kind of thing. But what type of battery is used in most hybrid electric vehicles as far as the battery, the muscle battery that makes things happen? That's the nickel metal hydride. I will tell you that there are people out there nowadays that are rebuilding hybrid battery packs that have gone bad, and they're putting them together with lithium ion, and they work pretty well. All right, now, how many of you guys have used nickel metal hydride batteries? Yeah. They got nickel cadmium batteries, that kind of thing. So the NiCad batteries basically have a memory, where they run down, and if you use them for 10 minutes and charge them back up every time they get, well, they won't last but 10 minutes. I saw your flashlight sitting right there somewhere a minute ago. You got it? Did you get it? Okay. All right, now then, thought about that battery. The AGM battery differs from a conventional flooded battery, which is the one with acid in it. In what way? Number 28. What's the way? The electrolyte is absorbed into a glass separator and will not spill.
Yes, that one.
Yep. Okay. Number 29. Each cell of an automobile, 12-volt battery.
Hey.
Which one? Each cell of an automobile 12-volt battery can produce about how many volts?
It's either A or B, I don't remember. I think it's A.
What do you think?
How many cells are in the battery?
How many cells are in a battery? Yeah, how many cells
Oh,
we
wait.
got?
Yeah, it's 2. It's B.
Hmm?
AC.
What? No.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys, don't be dummies.
I'm gonna go with C.
2.1.
Yeah, I knew it was.
2.1. You guys remember the ones of you when we measured each cell of the battery in that all those exercises that I gave you in fundamentals? How much was each cell? How much did each cell usually have? Just over 2 volts.
Depends what kind of battery. If it was a good one or bad one.
Yeah, just over 2 volts on a good battery, and it shouldn't vary more than 1/10 of a volt from cell to cell if it's a good battery. Okay. All right. Now then, battery electrolyte is a mixture of water and what? Yeah, sulfuric acid. And if you get sulfuric acid on your blue jeans, that's the last you'll see of the place where it's splattered. Let's see. Technician A says an AGM battery can be charged with any battery charger. Technician B says an AGM battery requires a charger specially designed for charging AGM batteries.
A.
Who's right about that? That's B. Yep. Basically, like I say, the best battery charger you can have is the car itself. Put that thing in there, fire the car up. You get the car to start up, you'll be good. And you'll get it. It'll just let it run and it'll charge it up. Okay, technician A says the state of charge of a NIMH battery can be determined by measuring cell voltage. Technician B says many factors should be considered in determining the state of charge in an NIMH battery. Who is it?
B. Wait.
Which technician is correct? Do you understand the question? Are you tuning me out and just waiting for the answer? Technician A says the state of charge in one of these batteries can be determined by measuring cell voltage, and many factors should be considered in determining the charge. B is right.
It was B.
Yeah, B is right. What type of battery uses 2 different electrolytes? Ooh, that's cool, isn't it? That's a cool question. What do you think?
NICD.
Huh?
Oh, lead.
A,
There it was A.
sodium metal chloride. Right? Technician A says the nominal voltage for one lead acid battery cell is 1.2 volts. Now, we just had a question about that. Technician B says the nominal voltage for one NIMH battery cell is 2.1 volts. Which technician is correct about that? Neither one of those guys are right.
Yeah, the battery in your car isn't my battery, is it? Well, yes,
Ooh. Nickel metal hydride is what NIMH stands for. And that's not, doesn't stand for the National Institute of Mental Health, okay? Okay, number 35. We're almost through here. It'll be lunchtime in a minute. Although, before we go to lunch, we'll have another 2 hours of videos to watch. I'm kidding. Technician A says one type of nickel metal hydride cell is cylindrical. Technician B says one type of nickel metal hydride cell is triangular. Which technician is correct about that? That's A. Which batteries use solid electrolytes? Solid electrolytes. That's lithium polymer. Lithium polymer. All of the following statements. Wait a minute. Let me get. What's lithium anyway?
Lithium is lithium.
Lithium.
All day, every day.
Okay, what can you tell me about El Paso, Texas, and lithium?
Not a thing.
Lithium ion?
There's lithium in the water.
Ooh, is that good?
It is good because what it does is when there's lithium and it's in the water supply naturally, what is good is whenever you drink water with lithium in it, you're sort of laid back. I mean, I'm not saying, but if you look at the crime rate in El Paso, Texas, it's lower than it ought to be. Because we don't have road rage out there. Everybody's like, hey, man, I mean, I'm not saying it makes you high, but it gives you a sort of a malaise, where you're just not as prone to, get tripped up. Nice people out there, Yeah. All right, now then, let's move on here. All of the following statements regarding nickel metal hydride batteries are true except A. Nickel metal hydride batteries have an excellent cycle life. B. Nickel metal hydride batteries can be housed in a steel container. C. Nickel metal hydride cells produce 3.6 volts. D. Nickel metal hydride batteries use potassium hydroxide for electrolyte. That's actually C.
Yeah, C.
They produce 3.6 volts. Technician A says nickel metal hydride batteries are an alkaline design.
Yes.
True.
Ignition V says high voltage battery packs are constructed using nickel metal hydride cells connected in parallel.
True.
What a minute. Parallel means what?
I can draw it.
You can, but how many? If it produces 3.6 volts and they're hooked in parallel, how much voltage will the battery pack out? 3.6 volts.
So they're in series.
Yes, they're in series. And if you got 28 of them with 3.6 volts hooked in series, you're going to have some multiplication going on there, ain't you? Right? All right, so let's look at the one that you're talking about on that. That's 38. That's a alkaline design. Why are they? What's the deal about alkaline? Tell me about alkaline. What other kind of battery is there besides alkaline?
Lithium.
No, what about acid batteries or acid and alkaline? So what's the difference between acid and alkaline?
Lead acid.
Huh? They're opposites.
Alkaline? They're opposites, I do that.
What is the neutral? What's halfway between acid and alkaline? What's the pH of water? 7. If you go lower than 7, you're going acid. If you go higher than 7, you're going
I
alkaline.
remember we wrote that down.
Exactly. What is the pH of Coca-Cola?
Like 6.
It's really close to sulfuric acid. You take a bowl of Coca-Cola, put a T-bone steak in it, it'll be gone in 2 days.
Like,
That acid eats it up. You know,
like
this-
2.14.
yeah, and it's acid. So if you're going up from 7, you're going to alkaline. You're going down from 7, you're going acid, closer to 0.
Used to be a
So
lot more worse than that, but they changed it. Congress changed the acidity for drinking by Coca-Cola paid for.
yep. Well, when the early days when they make Coca-Cola, they put cocaine in it. That's why they call it Coke. What is the voltage of this battery pair when measured at the plus and minus cables? If I measure this battery pair at the plus and minus cables, what would the voltage be?
12 volts.
What do you think, guys?
I know it's 12
When I
volts.
say 12
I
volts,
say 12
Why are you saying 12 volts?
Because
too.
it's
They
acid.
change
Or how are they made? I mean, how are they connected? Series or parallel?
Parallel.
That's parallel, isn't it? So they're going to be 12 volts.
How can you hook them in series?
You'd have to hook negative to. You got to see how they got them here. If you erase those lines and you drew a line from negative on one battery to positive on the other one, and then let your other 2 posts be your primary,
That'll make that 24?
that's 24 volts, yeah. And
I'm
so,
gonna do that in my car too.
yeah, it'll blow up all of your electronics. You'd have to have an engine controller.
Not the actual car part, just something else in the car.
If you've got an old car that's like, and we used to do this, and it scared the daylights out of this farmer that time. I went down there to help him get his old irrigation motor. It was an old 454 Oldsmobile, Chevrolet engine that was in his old irrigation motor, and it'd been sitting up all winter. You know how I was telling you about these engines when the oil gets off the cylinder wall, run, 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 run. So I put points and plugs in and all that, and chase the the rattlesnakes and wasps away, and I hooked this thing up we were going to jump it off. So we hooked his pickup up to this one. The battery was good and strong on this one. We hooked the pickup up, and it was still going run, 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 run. So what I did was I took one of the battery cables off, the negative one, I think. I hooked his positive one to the negative one on the irrigation motor, and then I hooked the other one. So basically, I had them in series like that. And it's about to throw that motor out there. What? Fired it right up. But he didn't have any electronics. See what I'm saying? Now another thing I had was this guy gave me this 24 volt military Jeep battery. It wasn't a very big battery, but it had 12 caps on it with 2 volts per. It wasn't a very big thing. And this one guy had his Dodge. It was out there going rah, 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 rah. I said, well, I didn't use this thing for anything. Let's hook it up. Man, it sounded like I'm going to throw the motor out of the car. Busted right off. And we had a Volkswagen Bug. When we put a 12 volt system on it, you could just leave that 6 volt starter on there. It just spin the dog wax out of it because it was 12 volts. So you get more voltage there. And twice as much voltage, not as many amps. That's what the deal. But don't try that on a car that's got electronics on it because it will fry the radio and all kinds of crap.
What about alternator? Will it bring alternator?
It can. Like I say, you got to be really careful when you're doing that kind of thing. But in the olden days, I used to see my dad do that. That's the reason I knew how to do it. I'd see my dad do it. My dad was always pragmatic. If it worked, you do it. That kind of thing. He didn't worry about a whole lot of it. How are the high voltage batteries cooled in an HEV? We were talking about that, right? What did he say? What did he say on the video? What about on a Ford Escape? It's got its own evaporator and everything. Daniel, kind of like that little evaporator back in his van. They've got a auxiliary cooling unit that uses the same compressor that's just for the battery pack. It air conditions the battery pack, and that's all it air conditioned. Now you got the rest
Yeah,
of
because
it.
I thought, I honestly thought that's how they're doing on the hybrids, they're just using AC to cool it. I know it's better, the batteries work better when they're full.
Yeah, they really do. And like I say, what else did he say that was peculiar about that? Was surprising. You don't want to have it too much of a charge or too little of a charge. You want it in a window. Usually 40 to 60, but he says between 20 and 80. Yeah, so if you go too high, it's not good for it. Number 41. What is the electrolyte used in a nickel metal hydride battery?
Potassium hydroxide.
No.
He's right. Potassium hydroxide. He got it. Are you making fun of me? Come on.